Okay, now let's go over the joints and the movements for the phone kick. First, we're going to go over just the joints. The joints that we have are the joints of the spine, the joints of the hips, joints of the knees, the ankle, and the toes. That's what you have to know for the phone kick. Okay, as far as the spine, we have forward flexion and we have an extension. So flexing forward, such as doing a crunch, and extending the spine coming back from that. Flexion forward, extension. At the same time, depending on how you throw your phone kick, especially if you throw your phone kick to the side, there's lateral flexion to the left, lateral flexion to the right. Coming back from lateral flexion is reduction of lateral flexion. So I laterally flex to the left, and the reduction of lateral flexion is me coming back to vertical position. And that's the movement of the spine. Very little rotation. This is the rotation of the spine, very little rotation is involved in a phone kick. Okay? Unless you throw a rear leg phone kick and you turn away first and then you sort of counterbalance. Most people do not throw their phone kick that way. So that is the spine. For the hips, we have flexion, extension, and if you throw your kick on the side of the body, we also have adduction, abduction. So the flexion of the hip is simply lifting the knee. Straight leg or flexed leg, doesn't matter. As long as you do this with the hip, that's a flexion. Coming back from this is extension. Slightly different muscles work if you flex the hip with a straight knee or you flex the hip with a bent knee. And we're going to talk about that. Okay? So once again, you flex the hip, flex the knee. Slightly different muscles work if you just flex the hip with a straight knee. Okay, so that's the hip. Now, and that is if you throw the phone kick in front of the body. If you throw the phone kick on the side of the body, the movement becomes abduction. Normally we think of abduction as a sideline kick. Zaichik, hook kick, roundhouse on the side of the body. But you can also abduct your hip if you throw the phone kick on the side of the body, and some people do it this way. Some people do not throw the phone kick facing the kick. Some people actually throw the phone kick on the side of the body. Some styles do it this way. Very often you get more height this way as well. And if you do not have hamstring flexibility, but you have the inner side flexibility, and inner hamstring is a little bit more flexible than the outer hamstring, very often people throw the phone kick on the side of the body. If that happens, to throw the phone kick on the side of the body, first you have to outward rotate the hip and then abduct. Okay, so this no longer is a flexion because it's coming away from a center line on the side of the body. This becomes the abduction. Not the same abduction because there's an outward rotation of the hip. So it's not the same abduction as for the sideline kicks, but the movement is similar. The position of the hip is slightly different. So we have an outward rotation, inward rotation. Okay, for the phone kick we have an abduction with an outward rotation, and then we have adduction. ABD, abduction, ADD, adduction. So that's for the hip. For the knees, we have flexion and extension. We have flexion of the knee, extension of the knee. The knee bends, that's flexion. The knee extends, that is extension. The knee also rotates, but that's not important for us right now. For your own knowledge, the knee can rotate out and rotate in. Now we have the ankle. For the ankle, we have plantar flexion and dorsiflexion. Plantar flexion is the toes pointing down when you go up on the toes, and dorsiflexion when you go up on the heels. So, plantar flexion, dorsiflexion. Okay, plantar flexion, dorsiflexion. When you throw the front kick, of course, this becomes a plantar flexion, except for the toes are pulled back. So for the toes, this is the extension of the toes, when the toes are pulled back. When the toes go away from you, that's the flexion of the toes. Okay, so those are the movements of the hips, the spine, the knees, the ankles, and the toes. And now let's actually put them all together when you throw a front kick. I'm going to assume that the front kick is thrown not purely in front of the body and not purely on the side of the body, but approximately in between. Okay? So if my front kick was thrown in front of the body, my supporting leg, my supporting foot would face in the direction of the kick. If it was thrown on the side, I would have 90 degrees. Okay? Like so. I'm going to assume I'm going to do something in between, which means that I have not 90 degrees, not the same direction, but 45 degrees supporting leg. So my kick is not exactly in front of my body, not exactly inside of my body. So in the hip, this becomes something between the flexion and the abduction. Okay, so we're going to assume that the body is turned forward, which is what most people do. So this is now, let's call it the flexion of the hip. Flexion of the hip, hands here. Now what you're going to notice that this hip is going to come up a little bit higher than this hip. Okay, so if you look at my fists, they are located where my hips are. They are the same level. As I bring up this chamber, very often this hip goes higher. The second this hip goes higher, my body begins to lean away. When my body leans away, of course, my abdominals and obliques keep my body up so it doesn't fall back. Some people will keep their body slightly leaned away and keep the spine straight as the chamber comes up. That's fine. Some people will actually lean forward and flex their spine. Okay, so hip goes up, the body naturally goes back. Some people will actually flex their spine to come forward. Okay, so that becomes a flexion of the spine. Now, once you're in a chamber, another thing that happens very often, some people are flexible enough to keep the legs straight when the chamber comes up, but the second the kick comes out, they bend slightly. So what happens here for the supporting leg, there is slight flexion of the knee. Slight flexion of the knee puts pressure on the quadriceps. Okay, slight flexion of the knee at the point of the kick. And because the ankle moves as well, there's pressure on the calf and the back of the lower leg. Okay, so that's the chamber. Once the kick comes out, there is an extension at the knee. At the same time, there's an extension at the knee. There's plantar flexion at the ankle, and the toes are pulled back. So that's the extension of the toes. So that's when the kick comes out. Now, once the kick came out, there's flexion of the knee, kick comes back, and then extension at the knee and extension at the hip when the kick comes down. And that is the snap front kick. The joints and the movement. We're starting with the chamber. Chamber for the front kick. First thing that happens, there's a flexion of the hip. The upper leg comes up. Okay? Flexion of the hips is performed by a number of muscles. First muscle that's very known for flexing the hip is the psoas and the iliacus. Two different muscles. Usually they are combined together into iliopsoas. If you want to go into the details, we can separate the psoas into the psoas major and the psoas minor. The psoas minor is in front. You could see the muscle here. And under it is a long tendon. And then behind that is a psoas major. Psoas minor is number 12 and psoas major is number 13 here. And then on the side of it, we have iliacus, called iliacus because it's attached to the ilium. And those muscles together form the iliopsoas. Okay, it's a very short hip flexor. It ends very high on the femur. Okay, now looking here in the front of the leg, at the hip flexors, we have a very long muscle. Okay, starting from here, going across and behind the inside of the knee. This is the sartorius. Sartorius is a very strong hip flexor, especially when we bring the chamber up. We also have a square looking muscle over here, which is the pectineus. It helps. It's not the main muscle that brings up the chamber, but it helps. And we have two more muscles which are the hip flexors, but they do not contribute a lot. We have the tensor fasciae lata, with the main muscle concentrated up here on the front and the side of the leg, and a long tendon, the iliotibial tract, running down towards the front of the knee. Okay, this muscle helps a little bit. It would help a little bit more if the leg was turned in. It begins to be more active when the leg is turned in. And finally we have the rectus femoris. Rectus femoris is a very strong hip flexor when the leg is straight. So if we were to bring the leg straight up, rectus femoris would do a lot of work. But because we bend the knee, rectus femoris, which is a hip flexor, actually does not work. On top of this, we have also the adductors, the muscles that are generally associated with being the inside of the leg, but they help to flex the hip. Okay, we have the adductor magnus, the upper part of the adductor magnus. The upper part of the adductor magnus helps to flex. We have the adductor longus, which only flexes at 70 degrees. If you go up any higher, it wants to actually come back down. It wants to extend the hip. And finally we have the adductor brevis, which also helps to flex the hip. the second thing that happens when we bring up the chamber, not only we flex the hip, we also flex the knee. Once we flex the knee, there's a number of muscles that do this, flex the knee. The first muscle that does this is the popliteus. Popliteus is actually the first one in line. It what's called unlocks the knee. It's the first muscle that flexes the knee. Behind the popliteus, which is a muscle here, you see a muscle that is a little bit shorter with a very long tendon. And that muscle is called the plantaris. Plantaris also flexes the knee, but actually it's absent in some people and it doesn't do a lot of work in most people. Okay, plantaris is right here. Now, besides that, we have a muscle that's here. It's part of the calf. It's called gastrocnemius. Has the outer part and the inner part. And the gastrocnemius is usually sort of the muscle that plantar flexes the foot or points the toes. But this muscle also actually flexes the knee. Okay. Besides that, we have the obvious knee flexors, which are the hamstrings. For the hamstrings, we have the outer hamstrings and the inner hamstrings. The outer hamstring consists of two heads, and it's called the bicep femoris. Bicep because it's two heads, femoris because it's on the femoral bone. We have the long head right here, and we have the short head under it. Now, the long head flexes the knee and also extends the hip. The short head also just flexes the knee. But both of these muscles flex the knee. Okay? They're going to be separated once we start looking at which one of them extends the hip. On the inside, we have semitendinosus, which is this muscle here. And you could see its tendon here. And we have semimembranosus, which you could see behind it. Okay? And this is the inner hamstring. Also, this muscle flex the knee as well. On top of that, there's two more muscles that flex the knee depending on which position the hip is. And those two muscles are the sartorius and the gracilis. Okay, and here you can see the sartorius and the gracilis tendon. Okay, the gracilis is actually an adductor. It's a long muscle running down on the inside of the leg. That's the gracilis. And the sartorius, we've seen before, starts from the front of the leg and goes in front of the leg across to the inside of the leg. And those are the muscles that bring the knee up by flexing the knee to form a chamber of a kick. Once the chamber comes up for the snap front kick, it all depends on whether the kick is thrown slow or actually performed slow, or the kick is thrown fast. If the kick is thrown slow, once the chamber is up, the hip flexors, as well as psoas and iliacus, which is actually under there, the hip flexors, as well as the abdominals and the obliques, are going to be maintaining the chamber while the kick is going to be thrown out or extended out. If the kick is extended out slowly, it's going to be performed by the quadriceps. And here we see the four parts of the quadriceps. In the middle on the top is rectus femoris. If you cut away the rectus femoris, right under it is another quadricep muscle right here, which is vastus intermedius. And then we have two muscles on the outside and the inside. On the outside we have vastus lateralis, and on the inside we have vastus medialis. What's important to remember about these muscles is that vastus medialis is the last one to contract. It only contracts when the knee is completely extended. If the knee is not completely extended, vastus medialis is not going to contract. As a matter of fact, sometimes people get issues with their kneecap because of that. If they never completely extend the leg, vastus medialis becomes weak, vastus lateralis becomes strong, and the pull of the kneecap becomes a little bit more lateral instead of being straight up, as it should be. Okay? And that is if you do the kick very, very slowly. On the other hand, if you throw the kick fast, the acceleration of the hips quickly transfers into the acceleration of the quadriceps. Okay? And the kick begins to come out. Now, if this is the lower leg, as demonstrated by my stick here, once the kick begins to come out, it doesn't go very far. it just goes a little bit, and once the kick comes out a little bit, these muscles actually begin to decrease their work, and the muscles behind the leg, actually the flexors of the knee, begins to work to decelerate the kick. So by the time the leg is extended, the kick is completely decelerated and is quickly brought back. Okay? Now, if the muscles behind the leg, the flexors, did not work very well, you will never get a lot of speed, because the quadriceps are going to be afraid to quickly do this movement and actually extend beyond a straight line and actually injure the knee. Okay? So the strength of the hamstrings actually will dictate how fast the quadriceps and the hip flexors will throw a fast kick, because they're not going to throw it too fast if the hamstring cannot decelerate the movement. Now, once the kick is thrown, the lower leg comes into play as well. The toes are pulled back. Once the toes are pulled back, the extensors of the toes, most of which are located right here in front of the leg, contract. There's a number of them. Once they contract, the toes are pulled back to expose the ball of the foot so that the front kick can be thrown with the ball of the foot. At the same time, plantar flexion happens, and plantar flexion is performed by the muscles behind the leg. Over here you can see the gastrocnemius, you can also see the soleus, and those muscles plantar flex the foot so that the foot is actually pointing down while the toes are pulled back. Now, when the kick is thrown, and very often when the chamber comes up and the body leans back, not only the abdominals and the obliques work, at the same time the supporting leg does a lot of work. First of all, the hip flexors of the supporting leg contract. They actually stretch a little bit and contract as well. Okay, that's called the eccentric contraction. So we have the psoas and iliacus, which is under here, under these muscles, attached to the spine behind there. They contract, and we have all the hip flexors contract as well, including the tensor fasciolatum, including the rectus femoris, and of course the sartorius, pectineus, as well as some of the muscles of the adductors contract as well. Okay, so when you throw the kick on the supporting leg, there's going to be a little bit of stretch and a little bit of contraction of the hip flexors. Now, at the same time, most people will bend their knee a little bit. When the knees bend, the quadriceps, not only rectus femoris, which is part of the quadriceps and part of the hip flexors, but the vastus medialis, vastus lateralis, and vastus intermedius, which is here, they contract as well because the knee is bent. Now, when the knee bends a little bit in the supporting leg, there is also movement in the ankle. Okay? And that slight movement in the ankle puts pressure on the muscles behind the lower leg, which is the gastrocnemius, the soleus. If you have the gastrocnemius cut off, you could see the soleus on it, as well as the muscles that flex the toes, which is a lot of little muscles located behind the leg. Okay, so these muscles work. If you throw the kick in front of your body, your gluteus maximus may or may not contract. If you thrust forward the kick, the gluteus maximus contract. If you kick straight up, the gluteus maximus usually does not provide a lot of assistance. However, if you throw your front kick on the side of your body and you kick instead of going, let's say on this figure, instead of going forward, and the kick goes to one side or another side, what's going to happen is, let's say the kick is performed with this leg, which is the right leg, we're going to have the gluteus medius, which is this muscle here, contract to support that leg. And the reason for that is because most likely this hip is slightly going to be raised and this one is going to be lowered. The hip on the non-kicking side is slightly going to be lowered, and that gluteus medius will contract to support that lowering of the hip. And this is what happens when a front kick is extended. Okay? Now the front kick is going to be recovered. When we have the recovery of the kick, which muscles are going to be working depends on if the kick is thrown fast or if the kick is performed slowly. If the kick is performed slowly, all the stabilizing muscles are still going to be in place. The hip flexors, the abdominals and the obliques, and the supporting leg, while the quadriceps are actually going to be controlling the flexion of the knee. Okay? The rectus femoris, the vastus lateralis, vastus medialis, and vastus intermedius are going to be controlling the flexion of the knee for the most part. Then when the knee is completely vertical, once the kick is extended from here to a vertical leg, it's controlled by the quadricep. And if you want to bend your leg back, then it's going to be controlled by the flexors of the knee. Now, a lot of people do not understand this, because how come the muscles that extend the knee also control the flexion of the knee? Well, think about a bicep curl. When you perform a bicep curl, on the way up, it's the quadriceps that control the movement, and on the way down, it's the quadriceps that control the movement. So think about it this way. It's concentric contraction. The quadriceps are shortened on the way up and lengthened on the way down. Okay? So the same thing here as with a bicep curl. This muscle controls the up and down movement for a slow kick. However, if the kick is performed fast, most of the contraction is performed by the muscles in the back of the leg, the flexors of the knee. However, there is still going to be some assistance from the quadricep, even if the kick is recovered very, very quickly. Now, once the kick is thrown and the kick is recovered, now we're going to be placing the foot down after the kick. Which muscle control that movement, once again, is going to depend on whether the kick is performed slowly or if the kick is performed fast. If the kick is performed slowly, the same muscles that lifted the kick are going to be the same muscles that are going to lower the kick. Just like the same muscles that extended the leg are the same muscles that bring it back. So the hip flexors, as well as the flexors of the knee, are going to bring the leg very slowly down. On the other hand, if you throw a kick fast and then you stump your leg down very fast because you need to move right after the kick, and you can't stay in one place, once the kick is brought down very fast, it's actually the extensors of the hips and extensors of the knees that bring the leg down. So the extensors of the knees are going to be the quadriceps, they're going to bring the leg down. Of the hips, they're going to bring the leg down, is going to be the hamstrings, as well as the gluteus maximus and the adductor magnus. Okay? Now, adductor magnus and the hamstring are going to perform the first part of the movement, and when the leg is almost on the floor, the last part of the extension of the hip is going to be performed by gluteus maximus. Now we're going to go over the stump front kick and the push front kick. Those two kicks are very similar. The only difference is that the stump front kick hits with the heel, and the point of impact is the heel, not the ball of the foot, like the push front kick, so the ankle is taken out of the picture. Okay? Now the chamber for both kicks, the stump kick and the push kick, is a little bit higher. The knee goes a little bit higher than the snap front kick. Okay, so if you saw the snap front kick, you can bring the knee here and kick to the abdomen level. However, if you try to push out and your knee is here, you can't push out very high, so you'll be pushing low, such as to the knee, for example, or the inside of the thighs. So the knee has to come up a little bit higher. Once the knee comes up a little bit higher, you have the room to actually push by extending the knee and the hip. Okay? Notice the difference. This is just the extension at the knee, and this is the extension at the knee and the hip. Okay? Very often, when you have to bring a higher chamber, the hip will come up a little bit more. Once the hip comes up a little bit more, the kicking hip, the body will go back more. So you have to flex forward more than you would on a snap kick. That's number one. And number two, very often the knee will bend just a little bit more to allow this hip to raise and this hip to drop. Okay? So those are the primary difference. Now going over the movement, it's very simple. Flexion of the hip, flexion of the knee. Okay? There could be a slight flexion at this knee, and there's slight movement of this ankle as the chamber comes up. From here, there's an extension of the knee, extension of the hip. From here, the third part, we have flexion of the knee, flexion of the hip, and then extension of the hip and extension of the knee as the leg comes down. Okay? Now, at the point of impact for a push front kick, there's actually plantar flexion, meaning that the ankle plantar flex at the point of impact. The toes are pulled back throughout the whole time, so there's an extension of the toes the whole time, but there's plantar flexion or this type of movement at the impact, and the impact is produced with the ball of the feet. Okay? And that is the push front kick. For the stump front kick, the chamber comes up just a little bit higher. This knee may bend just a little bit more to allow the hips to go up higher than the snap front kick and even higher than the push front kick. So the knee may bend a little bit more. So this hip comes a little bit higher, this hip drops a little bit lower. The body will go back even more, and then you have to flex the spine to come back to the vertical, even though some people actually prefer to be back here. But there could be problems with coming back to follow up with punches or coming back up to follow up with other kicks as well as balance. So very often the spine will flex to come back. Okay? So once the chamber comes up, there's an extension of the knee and the hip, and the strike is produced with the heel. Then there's a flexion of the knee, flexion of the hip, and coming back down, there's an extension of the hip and extension of the knee. Notice there's a difference. This is not a snap front kick with a heel. Okay? Not just the knee moves. This is not it. If you're striking a surface such as the jaw and you have enough flexibility and experience to strike with a heel, you can do a snap front kick with a heel to the jaw. That is possible. However, most people will do this kick to the body, sometimes to the chest, sometimes to the abdomen, sometimes to the groin or parts of the leg. Okay? So here the ankle does not do anything. The heel comes out and comes back. Once again, this is very often a rear leg kick, sometimes produced with the front leg. So this is the joints and the movement for the stump front kick. Now, when we bring up the chamber, for the push or the stump front kick, we first flex the hip. Once again, the psoas minor, the psoas major, and the iliacus begin this movement. Okay? All these three muscles together are called the iliopsoas. In addition to this, the hip flexors up here also flex the hip for these two kicks. The sartorius, the pectineus, slight assistance from tensor fasciae lata, which is here. However, the rectus femoris actually assists in this movement. Now for the snap front kick, rectus femoris did not assist. But because the push front kick and the stump front kick flex the knee less than snap front kick, the rectus femoris actually assists. Now when the body leans back, the rectus abdominis and the external obliques that you could see planting at the angle from the outside in, the external oblique and the rectus abdominis, both of those muscles work to stabilize the trunk. Okay? Once the body goes slightly backward when the chamber is lifted, it's extremely difficult not to bring the body back when the chamber is lifted for the front push kick or the front stump kick. And once the supporting knee bends slightly, the quadriceps are going to be activated, and the quadriceps are going to be working in the supporting leg. At the same time that the quadriceps are working, the hip flexors are slightly going to be lengthened, and they're going to contract as well for exactly the same reason that the abdominals and obliques are contracting, because they're slightly eccentrically stretched as the body goes back and they work to support the body upright. The gastrocnemius and the soleus contract as well, and depending on if you saw the kick in front of the body or behind the body, we may get a contraction of the gluteus medius, located right here on the side of your gluteus maximus, you could say, to support the body upright. Okay? And that is primarily what's done to flex the hip. Now, once again, because the knee is not going to be flexed completely, depending on how much your knee is flexed, the flexion of the knee may be an eccentric contraction of the quadriceps or it can actually be a concentric contraction of the muscles behind the leg. Okay, so if you really pull your heel back toward your glutes, then the muscles behind the body are going to be working. Those muscles are gastrocnemius, popliteus, sometimes plantaris, biceps, femoris, semitendinosus, and semimembranosus, as well as the muscles which have tendons on the inside of the knee, the sartorius, which is primarily a hip flexor, and the gracilis. Once again, that happens if you really try to flex your knee when you bring up the chamber for the front push kick or the front stump kick. Now, at the same time that the hip is flexed and the knee is lifted, we also have the toes being pulled back. Now, once the toes are pulled back, the muscles in front over here, the extensors of the toes, pull the toes back, many little muscles. Some pull back the toes themselves, some pull back the big toe, some pull back the little toe, some pull back the three middle toes. So the toes are pulled back to expose the ball of the foot. Very often when the push front kick is thrown, the whole foot is actually dorsiflexed and only becomes plantarflexed when the kick is thrown out. Now, once the kick comes out, after the chamber, it all depends if the kick is performed slow, fast, against the target, or not against the target, that will control which muscles would actually do the work here. Now, if the kick is performed very, very slowly and not against the target, the hip flexors as well as the quadriceps are going to be extending the leg and even bringing it back. Okay? If the kick is thrown fast, it's still going to be the quadriceps, the hip flexors, and just a little bit of the muscles behind the leg. Now, once the hip is being extended against resistance, such as when you're pushing somebody's back, on the kicking leg, ideally all the extensors of the hip are going to provide force, which is going to be the gluteus maximus, the long head of the bicep femoris, which is here, not the short head, the semitendinosus, the semimembranosus are going to be providing the force, as well as the adductors, especially the adductor magnus, which we see cut off here. Adductor longus is also going to provide a little bit of assistance. Now, that would be ideal. All those muscles are the extensors of the hip. In reality, it does not work that way. When you throw the kick, the gluteus maximus is not in the best position to assist this movement. So there is very little work, sometimes absolutely no work from gluteus maximus. Okay? Because remember, the hip is not being extended directly down. The hip is being extended just a little bit. So since the hip is extended forward and just a little bit, gluteus maximus is not in a position to provide force here. At the same time, the muscles on the inside of the leg, the semitendinosus and semimembranosus, provide little force here as well. However, the long head of the bicep femoris provides a lot of force. It's in good position to do the movement here, as well as the adductors, especially the adductor magnus. Okay? So the extension of the hips fall pretty much to two muscles: the long head of the bicep femoris and the adductor magnus, with adductor longus assisting just a little bit, sometimes a little bit of assistance from semitendinosus and semimembranosus, not a lot, and very little, if ever, any assistance from gluteus maximus. At the same time, when the kick is thrown, or right before the point of impact, there's a plantar flexion of the foot. That means that the ankle begins to point down, and the gastrocnemius, the soleus, as well as tibialis posterior, all plantar flex the foot. Now, once the kick is extended and you retract the kick or you rechamber the kick, Of course, the hip flexors pull the kick back. They control that movement primarily. Quadriceps eccentrically contract to allow the knee to bend. It's very rare, whether you do the kick slow or you do the kick fast, that the muscles behind the leg are going to be flexing the knee, because very often the leg is going to be placed on the floor before the knee flexes enough for the hamstrings, the gastrocnemius, the plantaris popliteus, and for the sartorius and gracilis to actually help in flexing the knee. Muscles work when you bring the leg down after rechambering. Once again, just like for a snap front kick, depends on whether you do it slow or if you do it fast. If you do the kick slow, the same exact muscles that concentrically contracted, or what's called positive movement, to bring the chamber up, will be the same muscles that are going to let the foot down to the ground if you do this kick slowly. If you do this kick fast, these muscles are still going to do a lot of work in this kick, but at the same time, the quadriceps are going to contract a little bit more than the hamstrings, and the gluteus maximus, as well as the adductor magnus and the hamstrings, are going to be contracting at the bottom of the movement to bring the leg down. The major difference between the stump front kick and the push front kick is that the target is being hit with a heel on a stump front kick and with the ball of the foot on a push front kick. For this reason, the muscles in the back of the lower leg, the soleus and the gastrocnemius, are not used on a stump front kick. There's three variations of the front kick. I'm going to show them to you right now. There's a regular front kick, which some people call the snap front kick. There's a push or a jab front kick, and there's a stump front kick. Okay. The regular front kick simply comes out this way, utilizing mostly the knee, and comes back down. Okay. The point of impact is the ball of the foot. The jab front kick, very often done from a fighting stance, usually with the front leg. The chamber comes up a little bit higher and the kick comes out. And the stump front kick, which usually done with the rear leg, the knee comes up even higher and the kick comes out with the heel. Okay. One more time. We have regular front kick, the push or the jab front kick, and the stump front kick. Okay, now I'm going to do them more slowly. You can practice these kicks to get the technique. You can practice them on your back or on your side. Regular front kick. Push, kick, and stump. Okay. You can also practice this kick on the side of the body. Regular front kick, push kick, and stump kick. The basic front kick is also practiced on the knee, like so. You can keep your hands down, you can hold on to something, or you can keep the hand up here, lift, kick, back, and down. Okay. Now, I'm going to demonstrate it with full force, full speed. This is a regular front kick right here. Okay. Could be thrown with the front leg. Could be thrown one more time with the front leg. Could be thrown with the rear leg. Okay. Now I'm throwing this kick from the fighting stance. Usually the target would be slanted a little bit down, like the groin for instance, or the chin. I'm going to switch sides. Again, the front leg. Now this is a snap. Okay, rear leg. Okay, again it's a snap. Okay. When you step up to the front leg front kick, usually it's a step up, kick, down. Rear leg, you would twist the leg, bring it up, extend the kick, bring it down. Now in traditional styles of martial arts, usually the kick is thrown with the rear leg from a front stance. Okay? Sometimes preceding by a reverse punch. Okay. Alright, and that is the snap front kick. The thrust front kick will go this way. Now, two ways of doing it. Very often it's used as a defense. When someone is advancing at you, advance slowly. Use it as a defense. You're not going to get a full chamber if you use it as a defense. You simply pick it up slowly, extend it, bring it down. And this is usually done with the front leg, sometimes with the rear leg. Okay? So if he's advancing, advance, I would go back, push, and stay here. Okay. If I'm going to use the push front kick as offense weapon, I would usually do it with a rear leg stepping into it. Okay. Okay. The big pad. This first front kick or the push front kick usually practice on the big pad. So we'll do the same thing again. Advance. Okay. And I'm defending with a front kick. It's not high chamber push. It's just coming from the floor just to stop him pretty much. Slight chamber just to stop him. One more time. Okay. And this is if it's used defensively. If it's used offensively, most people would not do it with a front leg. Most people would do it with a rear leg, but I'll demonstrate both. An offensive push front kick, okay, is used with the front leg or the rear leg. Okay? Okay. And the next kick is a stump kick. Okay? The stump kick is used at a little bit shorter distance, usually delivered with the heel of the foot. Okay? Now, you would rarely see this kick delivered with a front leg, but it could be done. Most often, if you're going to do it with a front leg, it will happen with a hop. Okay? This way, more body weight is transferred forward. Okay? Alright. Now, another way to practice the front kick, as a matter of fact, all the kicks, is with a partner. Okay? So, we're both in kicking stance, and I can either practice it for him to hold me up, I can use him as a balance, or I can pick different targets on his body. So for instance, if I'm looking for targets, I would tap different targets on his body, or I would just execute the kick slowly, holding on to him as balance. I do not recommend doing this kick full power unless he's holding the pads. So something like this, I prefer you did not do, because somebody could get hurt. Do the same thing on the other side. Okay. Again, if I'm picking out the targets, the knee, nerve, floating ribs. Okay. Different targets, or I can just practice the kicks by extending them. Okay. And this is partner kicking. Okay. Another quick drill, of course, is exchanging the kicks. Right here. Where he would throw the kicks at my target, and I would throw the kicks at him. Okay. Now, one thing I want to point out, Justin's style is in tied. So the way he throws his front kick is different than mine. Okay? Go ahead. He will be actually pointing his front hand as he throws the kick. Go ahead. And the rear side. Okay, demonstrating that on the pad. Go. And front side, front leg. Okay. If you notice, he is also hopping in as he throws that kick. It's a hop. Could be a step, but in this case it's a hop. And this is your basic introduction to the 3 variations of the front kick. now we're going to do the front kick specific warm-up, starting with the quick joint rotations. Okay, lift, elbow, shoulders, head, body side to side, body rotation, forward and back, hip circles, knee circles, and ankle circles. And now again to the knee ups, stretches. Working a little bit on the balance here. Besides the stretch. And when you move the leg around like I do, find the best position. While you're doing this exercise, focus on the stretch here, on the hip flexors. The back of this leg most likely is flexible enough that you're not going to feel anything, but try to focus on stretching the hip flexors in the lower leg. You may want to go back even a little bit to feel that stretch. Okay. Lunges. Here in the lunge stretch or the quarter stretch, very important to stretch the hip flexors. Other side. And just another variation. We may keep the knee off the floor. Other side one more time. Okay, and the next exercise is all fours work, which in my opinion is a great exercise to stretch the hamstring, which of course is very important for the height and flexibility of the function. Let's get into the downward facing dog. Take a few steps forward and a few steps back. Again, great stretch for the hamstrings. Now we're going to do the walking leg raises, walking forward, lifting the legs and coming back. Keep the hands where you would when you execute the function. And walking back. And the last exercise, which is a great warm-up, is the slow kicks. Okay? So you may place the supporting leg where you would when you saw the kicks. If you kick with the supporting leg facing forward, you would do that. Facing outward, you would do that. I personally will place it 45 degrees to the side and slowly extend the kick. Hold for a split second, slowly bring it back. And on the other side, lift, extend, hold, slowly bring back, and in. And we could do doubles or triples as well, holding up the chamber, extend, back, extend, back, and the other side, up, And this concludes the front kick specific warm-up. We'll now demonstrate the endurance training for the front kick. Begin with a shadow kicking. Okay. Now what Justin is practicing is pretty much his front kick moving around as if he was sparring with a live opponent. Okay. Visualizing the opponent working on the front kick. If you notice, every time he throws the front kick, he extends the leg and the hand at the same time. Okay? That's his style. Front kick with the 8 directions, also shadow kicking. You can put full force into the kicks, or you can practice like Justin did with semi-full force. Okay? Now, if I'm going to practice the 8 directions, stepping forward, stepping back, side, other side, right back, left back, right forward, left forward. Everything done with the front leg. Same thing now for the rear leg. Forward, back, side, other side, left forward, right forward, left back, right back. Okay. Now this is just for practice. Very often you would not throw. For instance, if you step right back, most likely you would choose a front leg front kick. You would not choose a rear leg front kick. But you never know. So this is for practice. If your style has 1 step to 3 steps, this is something that's not practicing your style. You'll practice whatever is there in your style. Okay? Now I'll do the same thing on the other side, this time at full speed. Forward, back, angle, angle, and the same thing with the rear leg. Forward, back, side, angle, angle, right forward, angle, left forward, angle. Drill. What this drill is going to do is force the person to kick not at their own timing, not at their own rhythm, but at their opponent. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to slam the pads, put one pad up. If this pad comes up, he's going to kick with his right leg. If this pad comes up, he's going to kick with his left. Now, I'm going to force him to kick at the times when he's not ready. This way, it's going to get him to kick ready when he's in an actual combat situation. Okay? It can be very tiring drill, but it builds endurance specifically in the kicks that you train. Ready? Next endurance front kick drill is an 8-directional front kick drill. This time we're not stepping to different sides, but we kick in 8 direction in a circle. Okay? So, forward, angle, side, angle, back, angle, side, angle, and back. Same drill can be performed with the rear leg as well. Forward, angle, side, angle, back, angle, side, angle, forward. Okay? Every time the leg comes back, if you were practicing this drill for the rear leg, okay, you would usually spin in the direction where you're facing. So right leg would spin this way, and left leg, front or rear, would spin this way. Okay? I'm going to switch sides now and do this drill fast. Okay? So the right leg starts forward, angle, side, and going around 8 kicks. Okay? Okay. And now the rear leg will turn the other way because it's the left leg, but I'm also going to bring the leg back every time I throw the kick. And the leg comes back to the original position. The next phone kick endurance drill is a squat and phone kick. Squat down and kick, down kick, down kick, down kick, down kick, down kick. Okay. Next drill after that is the burpees and phone kick. Okay. Burpees up and kick. Burpees up and kick. Down, up, kick. Down, up, kick. Okay. Next drill after that is the lunge and phone kick. Phone kick will be performed with the front leg alternating with the back leg. Kick, lunge, kick, lunge, kick, lunge, kick, lunge, kick, kick. And of course remember to do it on both sides. The next phone kick endurance drill is shadow kicking with a bag. You can wear a weighted vest, anything like that. Okay. If you like, you can mix in other kicks as well. Once in a while, roundhouse, hook kick, side kick with a phone kick together. Okay. Another option is to put the bag in front. This way you're going to have to watch the knees a little bit. Okay, so the phone kick will have to come out on the side of the body. Same drill. And after a while, you get very tired doing this. And this concludes phone kick endurance training. The first exercise is a slow kick, regular snap phone kick performed very slowly. You can do it in front of a mirror, you can do it by yourself, or you can do it in front of a partner trying to pick out different targets on your partner as you perform the kick as slow as possible. Doing the same thing for the push front kick as we did for the snap front kick. Slow movement with control. And the same thing for the stump front kick with a heel. Slow chamber, slow extension, slow recovery, and foot down. A similar exercise is a slow kick with assistance of a partner. So here we have interlocking the hands with a partner, picking out the targets on a partner. This is a great development for the kick, technique development by itself, as well as focus, precision, and control training. So you pick out different targets on your partner, solar plexus for instance, and extend the kick in that direction. Under the arm, chin. This technique allows you to hold on to your partner for balance and at the same time to work on a proper technique. Right now we're doing the push front kick as opposed to the snap front kick, which was just performed previously. And now the stump front kick with a heel. The next drill involves decreasing the surface area of the target. So we start with a slow kick to the large surface area and decrease it slowly. Still performing the kick slowly. And now we're doing the same thing faster, starting with a larger target and decreasing it. It may take a while before you're able to decrease the target. That's okay. If you see that you can kick the target easily, you can decrease it right away. If not, stay with the target large enough for you to hit and decrease it as you master this exercise. For the next exercise, we're going to be extending the kick slowly, performing a circle around the target, and then performing a fast kick. One more time, extend, slow circle, leg down, and fast kick. The next exercise is designed specifically for the push front kick. So what you do here is push your foot against the partner's palm, making sure that the contact is the ball of your foot. Your partner resists forward and resists back. This is not a strength exercise, it's a control and precision exercise. A more difficult variation is to do the same thing with a ball hanging, and you won't move, and the ball will move to the side or above the ball of the foot. A lot of control required to keep the ball in contact with the ball of the foot. The next exercise calls for kicking around the target, not hitting the target itself, but kicking as close to the target as possible and performing the last kick towards the target. Now we have two targets. We're going to be kicking right in between the targets, decreasing the distance between the target as the kick gets more precise. Now for the next drill, there's two targets. We kick the target, we kick between the target, and we kick the other target. Same drill from another angle. Kicking one target, kicking between the targets, and kicking the opposite target. If performed for a long time, this can be an endurance drill as well, but the endurance of the kick should be trained before performing this drill. The next drill, we hit the target at full speed, full force for the first kick, and for the second kick we extend the leg still as fast as possible without hitting the target. In this case, the leg is fully extended both when the target is hit and when the target is not hit. For the second drill, we extend the leg fully when we hit the target, but we do not extend the leg fully on the second kick. So kick the target, extend the leg, keep the knee slightly bent for the second kick. We begin the stability and balance training with the 6 directional movement. The 6 directional movement involves coming down by squatting down, going up on the toes, going to one side, flexing to the other side, flexing forward and flexing back. You can do this holding up just the chamber of the front kick, or you can do this with an extended front kick. Start with a little bit slower and increase speed as you go. For the next exercise, we're going to use a resistance band placed around the femur to pull the upper leg to one side or to the other side. The front kick is performed as the resistance band, in this case, pulls the leg to the outside, forcing the body to stabilize and balance. And now exactly the same thing with resistance band pulling slightly in the opposite direction. Now we're going to use different weighted objects placed in front of the body, in the back of the body. In this case, we have front kick performed with a medicine ball held behind the head. Now we place the medicine ball in front, performing the same front kicks. If done for a long time, this can become an exercise in endurance. But right now we're working on stability and balance. Next exercise involves dumbbells, 2 dumbbells over the head. Remember, when the front kick are performed, it's very rare that a person keeps the upright posture. So every time the body goes back to one side or to the other side, the body has to compensate. Now we have arms out with 2 dumbbells. Performing front kicks as well. Now we have a more difficult drill. What we do here is move the dumbbell in a circle around the body while standing on one leg with the chamber up. The heavier the dumbbell, the more difficult this exercise becomes. You can use any object, just make sure that it's secure. Now we perform the front kick as the dumbbell is traveling around the body. Make sure to move the dumbbell both ways, the clockwise and the counterclockwise. For the next exercise, we're going to place the resistance band around the ankle and the foot. Once we do this, we're going to be moving the resistance band in every direction without a specific rhythm, having the body to compensate for the pull of the resistance band. The leg must stay up. This is rather difficult because you don't know in which direction the pull will come from, and you have to work all the muscles, supporting leg, kicking leg, as well as stabilizers of the midsection to stay upright and keep the leg off the ground. Now a similar drill, instead of pulling with the resistance band, we slightly tap the leg with 2 pads, or you can tap the leg just with your hands. Once again, the body has to stabilize and balance to prevent the leg from falling or the body from falling. The next exercise has actual combat applications. Here we close the eyes and perform the kick as the partner pushes to every possible direction. Remember, when you fight in real fight, you will be kicked, punched, pushed, and pulled as you throw the kicks, and you have to get used to that so it doesn't surprise you and you can keep fighting, regain your balance right away and keep fighting. So your partner pushes and pulls you in every which direction, and with your eyes closed, you have no idea where it's going to come from next. We begin the antagonist training for the front kick with single stiff leg deadlift. Notice, if you cannot do a one leg stiff leg deadlift, you can try both legs. This is a posterior chain exercise. When you throw a front kick, most of the time the anterior chain works on both the kicking and the supporting leg as well as the midsection. The stiff leg deadlift allows the body to train the opposite muscles, the hamstrings, the glutes, the lower back. Notice that the antagonist strength is very important to allow the agonist, or the actual muscles that perform the kick and hold the body up, to allow them to do the most work they can do to generate the most strength and power that they can generate as well as for injury prevention. For the next exercise, we're going to be performing the direct recovery of the front kick. So we place the band around the foot and around the ankle twice. And now we recover the front kick, pretty much working the muscles behind the leg, the muscle that flex the leg. Try to perform exact movement that you would when you do a snap front kick. This is the opposite movement than you would when you perform a snap front kick, the recovery of the kick. The next exercise is the recovery of the push front kick. So instead of the flexors of the knee, we're now also training the flexors of the hip as well. This is very important for many reasons: injury prevention, as well as the ability to recover the kick, and of course the ability to tuck the leg in as much as possible before throwing the kick out, to allow the muscles that perform the kick to do the most that they can. You can hold on to something, or you can be freestanding, depending on your balance. Another variation of this exercise performed on the back. So once again, we place the resistance band around the foot and around the ankle. We work on the recovery of the kick. Here we recover the snap front kick. Being able to recover the snap front kick allows the best possible stretch of the quadriceps to allow for the stronger kick to come out once the kick is thrown, at the same time for faster recovery as well as injury prevention if the kick is thrown too fast or too high. Make sure to go through the full range of motion. The knee should be completely extended and flexed as much as possible. Now we're going to do the same thing for the push front kick and the stump front kick. Once again, the band goes around the foot and the ankle. And now the leg is pulled back. Both hips and the knee is articulating here. Not just the knee, as we did with the snap front kick. You have to have the flexibility of the hip to begin with to be able to pull the leg back. Here we have the flexors of the knee and the flexors of the hip working simultaneously to recover the leg. For the next exercise, if you don't have a partner, you can get in a push-up position with one leg hanging vertical and recover the leg this way. It's recommended that you use some kind of an ankle weight or resistant mechanism. And right now we're recovering the snap front kick, only flexing and extending the knee. And now we begin to recover the push front kick. This also works for the stump front kick as well. Great exercise for a lot of different modalities, including the balance, speed, power, stability. One of the basic exercises for developing the power of the front kick is one leg squat. Now you can see here one leg squat is being assisted by a bench. If you like, you can start with two leg squats and progress to one leg squat as well and do it unassisted. Assisting yourself with the hand is one of the ways to get yourself to do one leg unassisted squat. This is not exactly a specific training even for the push or stump front kick, but it develops the major muscles that extend the hip and extend the knee. Although the gluteus maximus here would work more than they would work during a stump or a push front kick. Now here we perform the jumps, which is a plyometric way of performing this exercise. You may want to start with 2-leg jump before the 1-leg jump. Do not forget to extend the other leg straight in front of you, working the hip flexors, also working statically the quadriceps, which is important for throwing the front kick, especially the snap front kick. The next exercise resembles more of the push or stump front kick than a regular squat. Here the body is kept parallel to the floor while squatting down. The body is parallel the whole time when the legs are straight and when the legs are bent. The muscles of the posterior chain used here resemble more the push kick or the thrust front kick than a regular vertical squat. Additional benefit of this exercise is the flexibility development, specifically the flexibility of the posterior chain for higher front kicks. It is recommended to do regular stiff leg deadlifts first before beginning to do this exercise. When this exercise is performed flat-footed, it resembles more of the stump front kick, and when it's performed on the ball of the feet, it resembles more of the push front kick. Now we're adding the plyometric element. Same movement except for the jump at the top of the movement, so the body is still parallel to the floor as much as possible. You squat down and then you jump up. Right now we're doing this movement with 2 legs. Once we start performing it with 1 leg, it's going to resemble more of the forward front kick or the push kick. Although this exercise does not visually resemble a snap front kick, and both joints are used as opposed to one joint of the knee for the snap front kick, there's still some resemblance in the way the kick is thrown against the target. Remember, most of the snap front kicks thrown against the target have some push elements to them at the end of the movement. Now we're doing the same thing with the assistance of the bench if you want to assist yourself or provide more balance during this exercise. The next step in training the kicking leg for the push or the stump front kick is to perform this exercise on 1 leg. In this case, you can assist yourself with the arm on the bench, or even with the arm on the wall. Make sure to do most of the work with your leg and only use the arm for assistance. Do not let the arm do most of the work. You want most of your body weight to be placed over your standing leg. Once again, you can perform this exercise flat-footed or on the ball of the foot. And now we go to the plyometric version. Same movement except for the jump at the end. It is recommended that you master the non-jumping movement before beginning to add jumps into it. If you have a mirror, you can place the mirror on the side of your body to make sure that your spine remains parallel to the floor and does not go vertical every time you jump up. There's usually a tendency to do that. You can do this exercise one side at a time, or you can alternate sides. To alternate sides, you would hold on to the bench standing behind it and land with 1 leg and then switch legs in the air every time you jump. It is very tempting to use the arms to help your body to come up. Try to use your legs as much as possible. When performing this exercise, you can do 2 jumps, 3 jumps or more on 1 leg before switching sides, depending on your level of conditioning. The next exercise conditions the quadriceps. We start in downward facing dog. We drop both knees to the floor and come up. This exercise is more specific to the snap front kick, but because the quadriceps are used on the stump and push front kick, this exercise is also useful to the stump and the push front kick. Okay, so we simply drop the knees and lift them back up. Most people are going to find this exercise relatively easy. So what you can do is place the resistance band behind your knees, hold it with your hands. This exercise becomes more difficult this way, especially toward the part of the movement where the legs extend. The more the resistance band stretches, the more resistance it is going to offer. Notice there is some extension of the hips, so this exercise does not completely isolate the knee to work the extensors of the knee. and now we're going to be doing the jumps from the same position. So we drop the knees to the floor and we jump up. Try to maximize the use of your legs and minimize the use of your arms. Most practitioners are going to find this exercise relatively easy after a little practice. The next step is to perform this exercise with one leg at a time. So we lift one leg, we drop the knee and come back up. Drop the knee and come back up. Same way as the two-legged variation. Make sure that your hips are above your head. This is not a push-up position. This is a downward facing dog position. Every time you extend the leg, it's ideal if your heel, the heel of your foot, can come in contact with the floor and the sole of your foot can be flat on the floor. This also works on your hamstring flexibility, not just the strength of your quadriceps and extensors of the hip. The next step is to add the resistance band. The resistance band is held by the hands. It goes around and behind the knee, and the knees drop to the floor and raise back up. Make sure that your toes are not turned out and your toes are in line with the leg. Okay, so once again you place the resistance band behind the knee. You go in a downward facing dog position with the hips raised, legs straight, arms and body in one line, and from there we drop the knee to the floor and come back up. Obviously one leg variation with resistance band is going to be more difficult. Another variation of this exercise, the hands on the wall instead of on the floor, and the knees drop to the floor. Adjust the distance of your feet from the wall to make the exercise more difficult or easier. Start with two-leg variation and progress to one-leg variation. Unlike the downward facing dog position, a one-leg variation is a lot more difficult than two-leg variation in this exercise. Make sure to master the two-leg variation before even attempting the one-leg variation. The next exercise, isolate the quadriceps, working all four heads of the quadriceps, and specifically designed for the snap front kick, although the quadriceps is used for the push and stump front kick as well. To do this exercise, the legs are stabilized with a fulcrum point under the knees. The legs are kept down. Notice the partner does not push down on the ankles. The ankles are tied down to the bench. It's difficult, close to impossible, to hold the ankles down. Here's a closer look. There's a padding over the ankles, and on the top of the padding are the straps that hold the ankles down in contact with the bench. The padding or the soft foam must be under the knees, and it must be over the ankles where the straps are. If it's not placed in one of the two places, chances are the tendons behind the knee or the shin muscles or even the shin skin may be injured. So both of those two places must be protected, the knees and the ankles. To do this exercise, the bench must be picked where there is no obstruction from the hips dropping down and coming back up. A partner or a stable heavy object must keep the other side of the bench down so that it would not flip over. If arm assistance is required, as you see right now, there must be a stable object to place the arms on to be able to pull yourself up. The goal of this exercise is to be able to do it without the assistance of the arm. If you do assist yourself with the arms, make sure that it's your quadriceps that do most of the work. Another option to assist yourself is to place two chairs on the side of you and assist yourself with a dipping movement by pushing yourself down and lowering yourself with the use of your arms. All the previous exercises were focused on the kicking leg. Now we're going to focus on the supporting leg. To do that, we place the resistance band around one of the legs. We step on the other end of the resistance band and we're going to be bringing the leg back. This is a similar movement that's performed by your supporting leg when the kicking leg is thrust forward. So when you perform a thrust front kick, you push the leg forward, the supporting leg slightly assists primarily through its posterior chain. Now you're going to perform this movement the same way that you perform the kick. If you face forward during the kick, this is how you would face when performing this exercise. If you have your leg turned out, you would have that leg turned out. As you can see now, the left leg simulates the supporting leg and the right leg simulates the kicking leg. If the kicking leg is turned forward and the supporting leg is turned out 90 degrees, this is exactly how you would do this movement. Another supporting leg strengthening exercise can be performed in a plank position. Here we lift one leg and we bring that leg up with the ankle weight. Small movement, the same movement that is used as a thrust for the supporting leg. Notice that you will place the leg the same way you do when you throw a kick. For instance, if you throw the front kick on the side of your body, you would actually have the leg that's on the floor on the side of your body, and that's the leg that's simulating the kicking leg, while the supporting leg is turned 90 degrees out, and there's 90-degree angle between both feet. Making small movement, exactly the same movement as the supporting leg would do in thrusting the body and the kick forward. The next exercise strengthens the calf. Remember, the ball of the foot is the point of impact for both the snap front kick and the push front kick. The stronger the calf, the more power is going to be transferred towards the target from the body. Here we use raised surface for the ball of the foot to go up against. There's a number of variations of this exercise. The first one is to do this with the knee straight. Simply go up on the toes with a straight knee. After that, we'll lean forward, still keeping the knee straight, performing the same movement. Now notice slightly different muscles in the posterior chain are going to be working here, and this simulates more the actual front kick, as the front kick is performed with a flexed hip instead of the straight hip. For now, we're doing this exercise with a straight knee, preparing for the bent knee variation. Now we're going to do the bent knee variation, so the body is kept vertical and the supporting knee is bent. So you go up on the toes, full range of motion as high as possible, keeping the knee slightly bent. The next option is to combine the flexed knee and the flexed hip. So the body is kept as parallel to the floor as possible, keeping the knee slightly bent, going up on the toes and coming back down. Very often at the point of impact, there's plantar flexion happening at the same time that there is an extension at the knee. In other words, the ball of the foot meets the target as the knee is still bent. At the same time that the ball of the foot is pushing into the target, the knee is extending as well, and this is what's being simulated here through this movement. The last exercise is a lower leg training, but not the kicking leg for the point of impact, but rather the supporting leg for pushing forward. We're going to assume that the supporting leg is turned out 45 degrees. Make sure that only the inner part of the ball of the foot is in contact with the floor. The outer part is not in contact with the floor. The hands stay on the floor, one leg is behind you, and from here you push your body forward using the inner part of the ball of the foot. Make sure that your leg is turned out 45 degrees, and this is the thrust that supporting leg, the lower part of the supporting leg, provides when a kick is thrusted forward, especially the stump front kick and the push front kick. If you find that your body weight does not give you enough resistance for this exercise, you can use your arms to press yourself back down into the floor, this way creating more resistance for your lower leg. Now let's talk about the element of speed. This applies to all kicks. Now, element of speed should be built as one of the last parts of your training. Perhaps only this power and the strength should be after the speed. Now, everything else should be trained before you work on your speed. You should have endurance in your kicks. You should have balance and stability. You should have perfect techniques. You should know exactly what you're doing. There should be no doubt in your mind how the movement should be prepared, how the movement should be executed. Once you have all of that together, then you can work on speed. One drill that helped me personally a lot to gain a lot of speed in kicking techniques, it looks like so. I'm going to explain it to you. You start in front of a mirror. You have to have a full-length mirror. You start in your fighting stance. Okay? You're in a fighting stance. You're not moving around. You're stationary. You approach the mirror. You bring up your chamber. You slow the kick. You place the kick down, and then you come back. You do it very slowly. Okay, the stepping is done slowly. The chambering is done slowly. The kick is performed slowly. It doesn't have to be high. Kick is brought back. Chamber comes down, and you step back. And you keep doing that with a step, not just a kick. Step, kick, step back. And you keep doing that for a while till you know everything how it's supposed to go. There's no question in your mind. There's no uncertainty. Everything is known to you. Your body remembers the movement. And then little by little you begin to speed up the movement. Little by little. It may take a few weeks for any kick, or a combination of kicks for that matter. Okay, so you know exactly where each foot is stepping, where the foot is being placed down. First you look in the mirror and you make sure you do it correctly, but you only stop doing this once you know that your body is feeling it. You don't have to look at your supporting leg to be turned a certain way. You don't have to look at your chamber to be pointing a certain way. Once you have the movement down, it's time for the second phase. Second phase, you are in a fighting stance. Once again, you start this without moving. You're not moving around. You stay in one spot. You visualize your target. You visualize your opponent. Okay? It's best if you visualize your opponent moving around, just like you're moving around. You visualize your opponent's target. You visualize his arms are moving. Maybe his arms are staying in one place. Okay? Once you visualize your opponent and you move around, you begin to watch his arms. Now this is all going on in your mind. You actually look in the mirror and there's nothing there besides you. But you visualize your opponent. And once you start moving around, you begin to inhale and exhale. Okay? Now, you have to do it in such a way that looking in the mirror, you see yourself. You do not want your opponent to see you inhale and exhale. Okay? Because speed does not mean anything if you telegraph it. If your opponent knows where you're going to kick and how you're going to kick there, for instance, you're going to kick him here, he will simply know that the second you move, he'll do this. So it doesn't matter how fast your kick is. This would be a lot faster than any speed that you can move to your opponent and throw the kick. Okay? So you have to watch yourself in the mirror and make sure that your opponent does not understand when you're breathing in and when you're breathing out. Okay? So you're not telegraphing. At the same time, if your body is telegraphing and you're setting up for a kick some specific way, you have to eliminate that too. So you have to watch yourself. At the same time, you have to visualize your opponent. Now, as you move around, you inhale and you exhale. Okay? Now, this has to happen very quickly and you have to work on it. First, it's done in front of a mirror, then it becomes natural part of you, and then you could do this on a real target. So you jump around, you move around, okay? Or you can be stationary first and then start moving around. As you see your opponent in your mind, of course, you visualize a target. Once you see a target clearly, you inhale. As you inhale, on your inhale, once the air is in your body, you actually visualize yourself having just executed a kick. So you see yourself stepping towards the target, chambering, kicking, bringing back, placing the leg down, stepping back. This all happens as the air is in your body. It should take a split second and you should visualize yourself performing that kick very fast. On the exhale, you step towards the target, you throw the kick, you come back. Okay? So you can do this first standing in one spot. You stand, inhale, visualize. Once you visualize the target, on the inhale you visualize yourself performing the kick very fast, and on the exhale you're actually doing it. Okay? And then you would do the same kick over and over and over again. At the same height, the same step. Once you have mastered that, you would change the height of the kick. You may change the kick. You maybe even change the angle. Okay? Change the angle of the movement. So instead of stepping forward, you might step a little bit to the side and perform the kick. So this is what you would do first. Once you have mastered this, now you can imagine further that your opponent has everything covered. You can never have everything covered, but let's say he does. Okay, the second step is to fake. Okay? And you have to see yourself do it in front of the mirror to make sure you do it correctly. Okay? Now, very often faking can be a real kick, or it could be just a pretending. Okay? Or it could be a fake with a hand, and then a kick. Or it could be two kicks. Whatever works for you. The point of a fake is usually to get your opponent either to move physically, to step in some direction, or to drop a guard. Okay? Low roundhouse, high roundhouse, low front kick, high roundhouse, high hook kick or roundhouse, and then a side kick. Any possible combination for any kick would work here. Okay? So, you visualize your opponent in front of you. You visualize him here. Suppose you want to throw a roundhouse kick right here. Now, you can throw a real roundhouse kick down here, having your opponent to drop the guard, or you can throw a roundhouse that doesn't actually kick him, but stay right here, having him to drop the guard anyway. Okay? And this goes for any kicks. This is the same for any kick. Could be X kick, spinning hook kick, any possible kick. You can do this for punches as well. Okay? So once you visualize yourself throwing a kick, you visualize your opponent dropping the guard, and then you throw another kick and hit your opponent on the inhale, then you actually go on and execute this. Visualization is very powerful. You see yourself doing it, you see it happen, it will happen. So this is pretty much a very important speed drill. You need a full-length mirror. You need to have completely mastered the movement. Okay, you need to have endurance of the movement mastered, because you're going to be doing the kick over and over and over again. If you do not have endurance to begin with, you're not going to be able to practice this drill for a long time. At the same time, very important for kicking speed and for kicking power as well is the muscles that pull back the movement, your antagonist. So, for instance, front kick, roundhouse, side kick, hook kick, doesn't matter. The stronger your antagonists are, the more chances they're going to be able to decelerate the kick well, the more you're going to be able to accelerate the kick. And at the same time, once you have to pull the kick back, it's the antagonists that are doing it. So strong antagonists are going to let you pull the kick back very fast. Okay, once your body knows that you can decelerate and pull back, then you're going to be able to throw a fast kick. So you have to master your antagonist training. Okay, endurance training, antagonist training, focus on control. What good is the speed? Let's say you master the speed, but then once you go in real life into the ring or on the street and you try to hit your opponent, you're actually not hitting him where you think you would hit him. This is where you visualize hitting him with your speed practice, the drill that we're talking about right now. You visualize it here and then you throw a kick here. Or you visualize kicking through the target and you can't kick through the target. You haven't worked on your focus, you haven't worked on your control. So that becomes very important as well. Those factors must be done first. Okay? So after this, I'm going to show you a couple of drills for speed, for timing, but this drill that we talk about right now is the most important one. This is a very basic timing drill. A target is simply thrown up and a kick is performed at a waist level or any predetermined level. In this case, it's a push front kick. You can make this drill a little bit more difficult if the person who is throwing the kick moves around instead of standing in one spot, or if the target is thrown in different places instead of directly vertically up or down. At the same time, you can use any object that's not going to damage anything. Soft ankle weights or different types of balls are preferable objects as well. A different way to do it is to actually let go from the top instead of throwing it up and let it come down. In this case, we're using a soft ankle weight. Okay, different angle. Also front kick. We're working on front leg push front kick, but this can be any other kick. Could be a snap front kick, could be a thrust front kick. In a matter of fact, right-hand side kick or any other kick can benefit from this drill as well. Make sure to spend some time on the focus and control of the front kick as well as the endurance training of the front kick before beginning to practice this drill. The main purpose of this drill is to work on the reaction time as well as the foot-eye coordination. The next drill is specific to defensive kick, in this case defensive push front kick. Notice that when you try to chamber the kick, the defender gets jammed. The kick has to come from the floor with not much flexion of the knee as a chamber. That way the offender can be stopped. If the chamber is brought up and the heel is pulled too much back, it's very difficult to stop the offense. Okay, so this is a defensive front kick drill. It's also built the speed, the timing of the kick, as well as the reaction time. This drill is also very often practiced for the defensive side kick. The job of the attacking partner is to combine the fake offensive with the real offensive to break the rhythm. Okay, now let's talk about the height of the front kick. There is a number of factors that determine the height of the front kick. For our purposes, we're going to break them up into three groups. The hamstring and the posterior chain of the kicking leg, the anterior chain of the kicking leg, and the anterior chain of the supporting leg. Okay? So we have the posterior chain of the kicking leg. We have the hamstrings, okay, outer hamstring, inner hamstring. We have the calf muscles of the kicking leg. We also have the inner thigh muscles of the kicking leg. Okay, and in some cases, depending how high you kick, even the gluteus maximus, which also posterior chain of the kicking leg. And sometimes the back muscles get into the role as well. Now this is all the posterior muscles of the kicking leg. Now, the main thing for them is to be flexible. If we're talking about the height of the kick, okay, if we're talking about the speed of the kick or the power of the kick, depending on the kick, whether it's push front kick or snap front kick, then the strength of the hamstring comes into play as well. For instance, the antagonist, which is a hamstring for the front kick, they must recoil the kick. Okay, if you push, the hamstring also help with the push. If you just snaps the kick, then the hamstring do not actually help in terms of strength. But in terms of height, flexibility is the most important thing. Okay, so flexibility of the posterior chain of the kicking leg. Okay, mainly how high you can lift the leg. If you can lift the leg, okay, someone would lift your leg, for instance, high, okay, and your leg goes up high, you have the hamstring flexibility. Okay, that is the flexibility of the kicking leg. Now, the strength of the kicking leg. The strength of the kicking leg comes from here. The hip flexors, we also have two hip flexors under here. It's very important. Okay, we have some hip flexors over here, and we have also quadriceps as part of the anterior chain. Okay, so the strength of these muscles will determine how high you kick. For instance, if you have the flexibility in the kicking leg, that means that you can stand, somebody will take your leg and lift it high. Okay? But if they let go of your leg will drop. That means that you have the flexibility to lift the leg, you have the flexibility here, but you do not have the strength. On the other hand, if you can lift the leg very high and hold it there, that means that you have the flexibility because your leg did go up high. These muscles were flexible enough to let that happen. And you also have the strength because this muscle actually were able to lift your leg high enough. That means that you have the strength, which are these muscles here. On the other hand, and this is very rare, if you can bring your leg, let's say, to your waist level and hold it, and you feel tension in the back of your leg, that means that you have the strength to hold the leg up here and to perform high kicks, but you do not have the flexibility. Usually this does not happen because if you were never flexible enough to go into that range of motion, chances are you never build enough strength in that range of motion, because you have to get into that range of motion first for high kick and then build strength there. Okay? So usually if you do not have flexibility, you're not going to have the strength. Okay? But you can have the flexibility and lack the strength. And this is for the high training for the kicking leg. Now, we also have the supporting leg. The supporting leg, what's important is the both strength and flexibility of the hip flexors, okay, as well as the abdominals, okay, and the whole anterior chain for the supporting leg. Now, if you remember what happens when you throw a front kick, okay, what happens when you throw a front kick, your body goes back, and it's not just that your spine flexes back, your hips actually go back. As your body goes back, you begin to stretch these muscles. But you're not stretching these muscles just statically, passively. You're actually contracting these muscles as you're stretching them, which is called the eccentric contraction. So you need both the strength and the flexibility of the hip flexors. Okay? So if you have these three factors, the flexibility of the posterior chain of the kicking leg, you have the strength of the kicking leg anterior chain, and you have the strength and flexibility combined in the supporting leg in the anterior chain, you will have a high front kick. Notice, this applies to the front kick thrown in front of you. On the other hand, if you throw the front kick on the side of you, things begin to change a little bit. Okay? The supporting leg, not only the hip flexors have to hold you up and stretch, but now the abductors take that part as well, okay, because the hip now raises to the side. So the abductors of the supporting leg play a role. For the kicking leg, we have the abductors, not just the anterior chain that has to hold the leg up. The abductors are right here on the side of the body. And at the same time, the flexibility of the kicking leg is no longer just the posterior chain, but now the posterior chain begins to be combined with the adductors. Now, adductors are working even if you throw the kick in front of you, but they go more into play if you throw your front kick on the side of you. Okay? So the drills that are coming up right now, most of them are aimed in working all of this simultaneously. In stretching and strengthening the supporting leg, hip flexors. Okay? By the way, your quadriceps have to be strong enough. If you remember from the kinesiology of the front kick, your quadriceps will work when your knee bends, so they have to be strong. Okay, only one quadricep, rectus femoris, must be both strong and flexible. The other three right here have to be strong, as well as a little bit of strength in the calf of your supporting leg. Now, before working on the height, you need to do general conditioning. Okay, why? Because if you do not have strength here or here, and you work on everything else, then you will stumble. You're not going to be able to stay in one leg. You also need to have the balance. So, height training is not the first thing to do. You have to master the technique, then you would work on endurance, okay? Then you would work on the antagonist, and then you would work on the height of the kick. So, the exercises that are coming up are going to cover all the sections, usually together, but sometimes one at a time. The first flexibility exercise is a front leg raise. So simply the leg goes up and down. Try not to swing the leg from behind you, but keep the leg in front of you as the leg is being lifted. The more controlled and the slower the movement is, the more strength is being developed, as opposed to fast movement working on flexibility. The next exercise is the knee circle or the front kick chamber circle. The primary goal of this exercise is to develop the hip flexors and the surrounding structures. You can perform this exercise freestanding or holding onto the chair. Notice the advantage of performing this exercise freestanding is that the hip flexors of the supporting leg develop as well. A more advanced variation is to perform the circles with straight leg. So kick is extended and small circle is performed. Imagine performing the circle with the ball of your foot, almost like drawing a circle with the ball of the foot. Once again, you can hold on to something or you can do this exercise freestanding. The quadriceps and the core muscles work as stabilizers for this exercise. The next exercise is the front line reciprocal inhibition stretch. Here we place one leg on a stable object. The supporting leg is turned out as much as it has to be for a real kick. We'll lean forward towards the leg, come up, and lift the leg up. Notice that very often when the leg is lifted, the body is going to be slightly leaned back, so the abdominals, obliques, as well as the hip flexors are going to be holding the body in place. One more time, the leg is lifted, placing the leg down and leaning forward. The stretch is not held for too long because the goal of this exercise is to contract the quadriceps and the hip flexors. This way, relaxing the posterior chain, placing the leg down, leaning forward, and stretching the posterior chain a little bit. The main purpose of this exercise is to decrease the angle between the kicking leg and the trunk. At the same time, this exercise also works the supporting leg, which has to stabilize the body once the body is leaned back and the leg is extended in front. It is very important to be warmed up when performing this drill. Please take a look at the warm-up section for the front kick, the downward facing dog walk or the all fours walk, the slow kicks as well as leg circles and leg raises are good exercise to warm up for this drill. There is a natural tendency to try to drop the body straight down toward the leg once the heel of the foot is placed on an object. Instead, try to avoid that tendency and reach straight forward toward the foot or reach forward and up with the head instead of dropping the body straight down towards the leg. Make sure to spend some time mastering this drill before working on the next one, which instead of a straight leg stretch involves recoiling and extending the kick before attempting the stretch. The stretching mechanism works slightly different when the kick is extended and recoiled before a stretch. It is not uncommon to feel the stretch of this exercise more in the tendon behind the knee as compared to the previous stretch. Make sure to pause for a few seconds with an extended kick before placing the foot down on an object. Experiment with this exercise by reaching forward with the knee completely extended when the heel is placed on an object, as opposed to reaching forward when the knee is slightly bent when the heel is placed on an object. Notice more challenge is present when you have to stretch forward with the supporting foot facing towards the target, as opposed to supporting foot facing to the side of the target. The last exercise targets the structures of the supporting leg, primarily the hip flexors as well as the inner side muscles or the adductors. Here we lean back, holding onto something, stretching the muscles of the supporting leg, and then pulling up the chamber, stretching the muscle of the supporting leg even more. Now we're coming up, holding this position for a few seconds, leaning back. As we lean back, we raise the chamber even higher. This stretch, once again, it's supposed to be felt in the supporting leg, and now holding the chamber at its present height and reaching forward. Every time the chamber is being pulled up, that height should be maintained when the body is returning forward. So one more time, reaching back. After having stayed in this position for a little bit, the knee is lifted. Keeping the knee at the height that it has been lifted to, we bring the body up, and one more time, reach back, lifting the knee, lifting the chamber, and coming up. And this is a great stretch for the muscles of the supporting leg.